Well, good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us for our state-approved museums and curatorial repositories Confab. We're very happy to have you join us. This is usually a meeting that we have to discuss repository issues or best practices. And sometimes they're in sort of discussion format and sometimes in presentation type formats. I like to keep the meetings though in a meeting format so that all of you feel like you have the opportunity to ask questions and feel like you're a participant in this forum. So I just want to kind of talk a little bit about the Confab in general, some basic ground rules, I should say. I am going to start sharing a screen here. Whoops. Here with this one. I would like to encourage all of you, if you could go into the chat, to introduce yourselves so that we know who you are and either what museum or repository you're associated with. Also, if you're not with one of those, but you're maybe with a local historic preservation commission, let us know what city you are with and what commission. We'd all like to know who each other is. So, and feel free as we're going through the presentation to ask questions as we go along in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat and trying to get those questions addressed for our presenters. And our presenters today, it's going to be split into two different sections or two different parts. We're going to be talking about the New York City Repository and its landmark preservation website for the first part with Amanda Sutphin, who's has joined us here today. And then we'll transform or transition into a discussion using a great tool called StoryMaps, which is an Esri product, and we have Peter Gamberg, who is a representative from Esri, who will be showing us that as an opportunity for our municipalities and cities and commissions, as well as the repositories, when putting together any types of web presence and exhibits. So with that, I would like to go ahead and start and thank you all for putting your introductions in the chat and continue to do so. And I will go ahead and start, as we always do, since we are in Colorado, with a land acknowledgement. Our land acknowledgement is that we acknowledge the land currently known as Colorado that has been the traditional homelands of indigenous peoples since time immemorial. We are grateful to work in partnership with the 48 sovereign nations who continue to call this land home. Together we plan exhibits, collect, preserve, and interpret artifacts, do archaeological work, and create educational programs to share the history of Colorado. Just a note to those of you who have joined us with all of our confabs, our next confab is going to be focusing on collections research for students and different incentives and challenges that we might collectively think of to encourage graduate students and undergraduate students alike to look at existing collections and how we can probably encourage them to utilize those collections maybe before they go out into the field and collect new materials. So I hope to have quite a few folks here in our usual discussion forum, but maybe also some university students as well as professors to join in that conversation. So that has not been set yet, but please take a look at our curation notes newsletter. If you haven't signed up for that, you can go to our website, historycolorado.org, repository-guidance-library. You'll find a link to sign up for that newsletter. So if you can join us, that would be great. As some of you may know, we have over 37 accepting repositories in Colorado, and those repositories are reputable repositories based upon the Historical, Prehistorical, and Archaeological Resource Act of 1973, which the state Colorado legislators declared that all archaeological and paleontological materials found on state, county, or city or any other local public lands belong to the state of Colorado. And as such, through permitting processes, all collected materials have to go into reputable institutions or museums or state-approved repositories. So that is our program. And as a repository, we encourage all of our museums and agencies that have collections to maintain and exceed their reputable status. And also, we encourage all of our repositories to seek funding to enhance the care of those state collections, either through the State Historical Fund or other funding sources. And as always with any of these funding sources, too, we have to demonstrate public benefit. And it's also important to keep in mind, too, that the National Historic Preservation Act defines preservation to include curation, and that historic properties also are defined to include artifacts, records, and material cultures. So it's very important, I think, for a lot of municipalities, particularly with historic preservation commissions and groups that have that, to consider the repositories in your community and to make the connection between the historic preservation commissions as well as the repositories that hold those collections. And really, the city of New York has a great example of that. And also, one other thing to consider if you're ever thinking about going for a certified local government grant, which is one of our pass-through grants that's administered through the Park Service through our office, is that curation is a eligible endeavor, and that those curation projects should also, as appropriate, should be made available to the public through museum display or other means. Websites are another means, which we're going to be demonstrating today. So temporary exhibits such as these, perhaps online, are a allowable program grant assisted item. So think about that as you are considering any type of archaeological work in your community. So with that, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Ms. Amanda Sutphin. She's the Director of Archaeology at the New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission, and she's also the manager of the New York City Archaeological Repository. And I hope that you will enjoy taking a look at what New York has been able to put together and hopefully maybe emulate parts of it for your own community. So with that, I am going to stop my sharing and have Amanda start sharing her presentation. Okay,
Thank you very much. Thank you. You can see the slide.
Yes, indeed. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you very much for inviting me. So today I am first going to talk about who we are, how archaeology happens in the city very quickly, and then how the repository was founded, what we do there, and then walk through our website. And I just want to apologize right now. I'm talking to you from New York City. The city is very loud, and it seems like several fire trucks are going by right now. So I apologize for the background noise. So just I wanted to begin this with this really beautiful slide of urban archaeology. This was taken at the World Trade Center site in 2010, and the archaeologists are standing on a late 18th century sloop that was found there. It had been used for landfill. Many people often say to me at cocktail parties and such, how could there possibly be archaeology in the city? And I think this is a wonderful rejoinder. The Landmarks Preservation Commission was established in 1965 in response to concern that physical elements of New York City's history were being lost, much like the demolition of Penn Station, which is shown in both of these pictures in 1963. And as Vincent Scully once said, once entered the city like a god and now scuttles in like a rat. Today, Landmarks is the nation's largest municipal preservation agency, and it's responsible for protecting New York City's architecturally, historically, and culturally significant buildings and sites through designation and then the regulation of them. There are more than 37,000 landmark properties today in New York City. New York City's first archaeologist was hired in 1980, and the archaeology department was created in 2002. Archaeology principally happens in three ways in the city. The first way, which is probably most familiar to all of you, is through environmental review. There's both federal and then state and then city regulations that require consideration of archaeological resources for projects subject to environmental review. And that is how most archaeology happens. And this picture is showing a mikveh that was found in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. The mikveh dates to the late 19th century, and a mikveh is a ritual Jewish bath. At that time, there were many Jewish immigrants coming through New York and settling in that neighborhood. This mosaic is now on display at the Museum of Jewish Heritage, which is in Lower Manhattan. The second way that archaeology happens in the city is because of the designation of properties. This is an example of Trinity Churchyard, which is a colonial burial ground at Broadway and Wall Street. And recently, a lot of archaeology has happened because the church is changing the topography to ensure that all the entrances to the church can be accessed by wheelchairs and utility work. So they did find quite a lot of human remains, and we'll be analyzing them and then reinterring them. And then the third way is through academic inquiry. This is a picture of the Seneca Village excavation project, which took place in Central Park. Seneca Village was a 19th century free Black community, which was taken through eminent domain. It was condemned through eminent domain to build Central Park. And archaeologists have been trying to better understand that history. And this collection is actually at the repository. The repository itself was founded in 2014, and our mission is to curate the city's archaeological collections, to make them accessible to scholars and to look to university classes in the repository itself. And these images are of a class coming to the repository, and then to the public through our website. So it'll be the website that I'm going to walk you through. Okay. Just quickly jump to the other screen. Okay, can you now see the website screen, I hope? Yes?
Yeah,
okay,
good.
Great. So the website was designed to appeal to different audiences. So this is our home screen, and we've tried to make it initially enticing to the public. So first I'm going to show you the ways that we hope the public and people interested in archaeology can access it. And then I will take you through how archaeologists and other scholars are apt to use the site. And then finally, I'll return to the agency's website and give you a little more information there. So this is the initial home page. And again, we've tried to make it as enticing as possible. So you can see there's multiple ways of navigating to different types of information. The first is to see the online exhibits we have that Todd referred to. And then we also have a way you can just browse through collections. We have quizzes, and then we have these different parts of the site. But let's start with the exhibits. So I just mentioned Seneca Village. So this page has multiple exhibits. We have information about the exhibit and what we're trying to convey. We always provide information for additional readings. And then we have information about the specific artifacts that relate to the story we're trying to tell. In this case, this is a salt-glazed stoneware storage jar. We have information about, again, related to the story. And then if you want to see the full information we have, here you have the dates, and you have different pictures, which you can look through and download if you wish. And then we have more specific information that's more familiar to museum specialists, the kinds of detailed information about the objects. And I should note that the website only shows the fields that have been filled in. In addition to that, We have a map showing where the site is located. And then we have information about the project itself. So you can click on this and then see what was the project, what did they learn, who was involved. You can see the different contexts. Contexts are where groups of artifacts were found together that relate to each other. And that's very important information for archaeologists. And then we have information about all the objects that were found at the site. So I'm going to click back. And so that's an example. So I've kind of given you a twofer. That's going from the main exhibit, but scholars can get more involved with the particular objects. We have different topics for different people. We have one that kids seem to like, which is about historic toys, health and beauty. Again, different topics trying to appeal to different audiences. The other way the public seems to particularly enjoy seeing the website is actually through our map. Many people want to see what's been found in my neighborhood. And so they can click and then they can learn about the site. Let me find a different one with a little more. I'm going to go back to Seneca Village. So here we are back to information about that site. And again, here you can get all the objects we have if you wanted to see them. And there they are, and you can click and go through at your leisure. The other way that the public tends to come to us is curious about New York City history. We do have a timeline, so it's important historic events. And then we are starting, this is still in process, but we're starting to link any objects we have to these particular historic moments. So one to mention is the Great Fire of 1835. One of our collections has artifacts that were burned as part of this. So this, you can get to that site. You can see the objects that were affected by this fire, and here they are. The other users are teachers. So we have information about how to use archaeology in the classroom. We have someone from our Department of Education wrote a piece about how it can relate to Common Core and gives specific examples for teachers of where they can put it in their classroom. We also frequently ask questions. We have pages for students. We do have lesson plans as well. And then we have these quizzes, which I invite you all to take. People do seem to enjoy these. It's kind of a fun way to introduce archaeology. So we have different quizzes with different themes. You see a picture in this one, you see a picture of the artifact. You think, well, what is it? The scale is a good clue, but we do have hints, and then the answer. And then if green, you're right, red, it's not. And then another way is reports. There are over 1,500 archaeological reports that have been done in the city. And so you can get, we've scanned and digitized all of them, so you can get to them from this page. And then we have, of course, the About section, which is who we are, our partners, in other words, how we funded ourselves, who's helped us with this endeavor, Contact Us page. And then we also have news updates that relate to different stories. There was an exhibit at the Metropolitan Museum of Art that relates to one of our collections. We have an archaeological landmark site that was designated a year ago. It's that kind of story. And then finally, the collections. I think most scholars, you can either just do a pure search. So if you know exactly what you're looking for, and now I'm afraid you can see my internet connection is slowed down, and I'm sorry. And you can either look at pictures, you can enter any search term you might want. You can look by project, or if there's specific context you're looking for, if you're an archaeologist, really know what you want, or if you're a materials arts person and you know what kind of maker, you're looking at a specific maker's mark, you can search all of that here, or you can just scroll through. And we have, with the objects we have, put a preference for anything with an image will come up first. We have images of about 12,000 artifacts now, but we have over 100,000 that are part of our database now, and we're adding more all the time. And then last piece is the other piece that, again, archaeologists will often know. They know we have a specific collection, and so they'll come here. And then that's another way into our website. And then to go back to the reports. So this is actually through the agency's website. I don't think users necessarily realize that I'm on Landmark's home website, and this is where the archaeological reports are. And you can search, as I said, and then there's all the other information. This is the homepage of the agency. And you can get back to the website we were just on here. But the other thing I did want to note, since StoryMaps are the next presentation, we do have some StoryMaps which can be found here.
Amanda, that's awesome. I know that Katie Lewis has her hand raised up.
Okay.
Katie, would you like to unmute yourself and ask the question?
Sorry about that. I was just zooming in actually to see a little bit closer. So that was an accidental, it was a very good explanation. That was just an accidental hand raise.
No worries.
Okay.
If anyone has a question, if you want to go ahead and type that into the chat, or you can unmute yourself too. Right now, I guess this is a good point in time. If you'd like to have a question, you have a question for Amanda, this would be a good time.
Oh, the other thing I probably should have mentioned is that our underlying database is QI, which was developed by Keep Thinking, and they also designed the website. So I did want to, so that's, I think, in part why the integration of the database and then the website works very well. So if you're designing something new, I would suggest looking into that.
Yeah, I've had a few repositories who've been asking about what the best type of software product that they could possibly use. So
there's a lot of choices. There are choices. But as I said, we use QI by Keep Thinking.
Great.
Any questions? And if you can think of anything, you're welcome to email me. It's asutphin@lpc.nyc.gov. And our website you can find just by Googling New York City Archaeology, but the URL is nyc.gov/archaeology. And you can spell archaeology either AEO or just EO. Either way, it'll get to us.
Amanda, before we switch to, can you just go to the link too that shows like how this kind of all relates to the Landmark Preservation Commission as well? So it's kind of all linked in there. Yeah,
so the website, so as you see, you can just click anywhere on the website. If you click landmarks, it'll bring you back to this homepage. Is that what you meant, Todd?
Yes.
And then if you have questions about archaeology, we have a whole page here. This is, again, you can search those reports I mentioned. And then the other thing I should say is we have guidelines for how archaeological work works in New York City. Oh dear, that's not good. Let's see if it opens up quickly. So here they are. So these are very detailed guidelines about exactly the regulations that require archaeology and then the process of archaeology going through all the phases. And we also have a lot of references and additional information in this. And we do also have guidance for how collections should be curated, how they should be archivally wrapped and that kind of thing, cataloged and that kind of thing, which is in the back of this document, which some of you may be interested in.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, I think many of us might be interested in looking at that.
I'm sorry, it's initially blurry. I've never had that effect. I'm so glad I got to share that with you.
I think it might be just an artifact of the PDF and not necessarily what it really looks like.
Yeah, so we do have step-by-step project closure, the archives, curation. We've really gone into a lot of information. So, and yeah, and then we do have specific items for things, the way they should come to the repository. Which is right here, Appendix H. Anything else? Kind of gone over a lot of information rather quickly, so please let me know if you do have questions.
5 minutes for questions. So
I have a question.
yes, go ahead, John.
How have you dealt with orphan collections in your work?
By orphan collections, do you mean ones that no one else wants to deal with? Or...
That's one avenue for creating one.
Okay.
They're basically collections that were recovered under a different researcher or under a different set of rules, which haven't been looked at in a long time, which an institution has stored for a long time. And the institution wants to do something positive with those collections. And I just wondered how you go about dealing with that. If there's any system that you guys have implemented for doing so and so forth.
That is a really great question. I should say as a repository, we're kind of on two tracks. One is taking, we call them legacy collections, but orphan collections is another word. So you have to take those collections exactly as they are. Some of those collections were completely analyzed, appropriately boxed up to the latest in the date they were done. And some we have virtually no information. There was two collections that I actually found in a women's bathroom in a park, a public park. I don't know why anyone thought that was a great place to store it, but they did. And that had no associated documentation. So the collections are in a range of conditions, and we're trying to bring them up all to the same standard. So some legacy collections require quite a lot more work than others. So the ones I found in the bathroom was really just trying to reach out to as many people in the community to figure out who knew what it was. Was there any documentation that people had squirreled away in their closets? And luckily they did still have some documentation, and we're now working to finish analyzing it and getting a report and getting that online. So yes, but I'm afraid each legacy collection, because they're all so different, we've really had to treat each one uniquely. But while we were doing this effort, we've also been working very hard to create new guidance and a new template for how collections should be done today to ensure that when it comes in, it can be made available to the public as quickly as possible. Because I want to limit the amount of legacy collections we're working on, not to keep repeating that again and again. And I should say, because we are the city of New York, in some ways, these are collections the city itself is responsible for. So, and we are the expert agency for the city. So in some ways we've had more authority than some repositories might have, which I think probably has helped. But that is a really great question. And it is definitely difficult.
As a follow-up, may I ask, it sounds to me like because each one is so unique and you've been sort of dealing with them piecemeal so far, sounds to me like there's no line item in the budget that's set aside for this kind of work yet. And I just wonder if you were looking at that.
So our funding, there was a developer who did something they shouldn't have and had to pay the city a lot of money to be used for the city's archaeology. So that was the money that we've used to jumpstart this. And in 2014, a developer actually donated, gave us a license for the space that we're in. So it was twining those two moments together is what helped jumpstart our effort. So initially, we actually partnered with the Museum of the City of New York to try to create a coherent curation plan, because this wasn't necessarily my agency's specialty at the time. And they were the ones who worked with us to develop, to select, keep thinking, to develop this database and to develop curation process. Funding is a chronic problem. I don't want to suggest it isn't, but currently we still have funding. We've had additional donations that have been made, and then plus, I'm paid for by the city. I'm an employee of the City of New York, and so are some of my staff. But one person is grant funded, but absolutely funding is always a problem.
Okay, so it hasn't been integrated into the official budget yet. Is that correct?
I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that. It's definitely something the archaeology department is responsible for, and we're in the city budget.
All right. Well, thank you.
If that answers your question.
Sort of.
Jonathan. I want to leave some time for our next presenter. So keep those questions going. If you want to just go ahead and
Use the
put those in
chat.
the chat, we will have hopefully some time at the end as well to kind of readdress any and all questions. I am going to share with you a little. Go back here. I also wanted to mention too, Amanda's new book is coming out, Buried Beneath the City. So if you want to know more about the archaeological history of New York, check that out. I believe it's coming out this month or later this month. So check that out.
It's actually available on Amazon now. Although interestingly, the publisher has not sent me a copy, but it is available on through Amazon. And the official publication date is September 6th.
Excellent. So our next presenter, so we've talked about New York City and its website. It incorporates a little bit of the artifacts themselves from the repository. It has online exhibits, utilizes, as Amanda has mentioned, at least one StoryMap product. And we've actually seen a number, if you actually kind of Google around the internet, a number of applications where we see the Esri product being used for archaeological types of materials, either archaeological sites and or collections. And as you may be wanting to put together an online exhibit to highlight your artifacts in your community and at your repository, I thought it would be very appropriate to ask a expert or a representative from Esri to tell us more about the product ArcGIS StoryMaps. So for this next part of the confab, we've got Peter Gamberg, who is a senior solutions engineer with Esri. So Peter, if you would like to, I'm going to stop sharing.
Yeah, I will take over. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the kind introduction. And Amanda, thanks for sharing all that. It's some really good content and exciting to see you are using StoryMaps as well. Todd, it looks like I'm not able to share my screen.
Okay, let me make sure that you are co-host, but let me make sure that you are really a co-host here. Looks like you're in a couple places, so there you go.
There we go. Okay, there we go. Okay. So hopefully coming through now is a story map, and what better to talk about story maps than to actually use one. So today, kind of the goal and agenda here would be to give you all an introduction to story maps. If you're not familiar with them, if you are familiar with them, maybe you'll be exposed to some new capabilities, or at least some great examples of how folks are using them within your space. And we'll talk a little bit about those use cases and kind of how folks are leveraging this product to do kind of, as Todd and you all have mentioned, in online exhibits and exposure and representation of your all's work. I suppose a little bit about me. I'm a solution engineer at Esri. I have this great role of being able to learn what you all do and then kind of find the technology to put in place to help you get to where you want to be. I'm located here in Denver, Colorado, so local, I think, to your all's world, and really interested in the work that you do, and looking forward to this conversation. And yeah, if you do have any questions as I go here, please either just interrupt me or put them in the chat, and we should have plenty of time to discuss those here as well. So what is a story map? A story map essentially takes interactive maps, and it allows you to combine them with multimedia, being videos, audio, pictures, in addition to text, to help you tell a meaningful story about the world. And of course, that is a pretty broad statement. And today we'll kind of take a look at some of these details and do it through some user examples, and hopefully get you all excited about going out and creating some of these for yourself around the collections that you all have. So again, at a high level, ArcGIS StoryMaps, it's an online digital telling platform. An ArcGIS StoryMaps builder, it can be used to build a custom digital storytelling project that, again, is going to integrate interactive maps, audio visual material, text, and lots of other kind of content and and other applications that you might have that you can embed within these stories. And the story maps, they can be used on their own. And of course, they integrate with the rest of the ArcGIS Online platform and the ArcGIS platform. So if you're already using that to create content and have data and information there, they can very easily be brought in and shown here and made accessible to your end users to give them context to the work that you do. And ArcGIS story maps are here to help you tell remarkable stories. And hopefully what you see here today will be some of those. And to do it through custom maps that are going to inform and inspire your stakeholders and your constituents. And we all know that stories really can affect change and hopefully influence people's opinions and create awareness. And doing all of that, maps are going to be an integral part of that. So story maps is going to be able to kind of bring this technology and capability together to give a stronger sense of place, illustrate spatial relationships, and really add visual appeal and credibility to the content and stories that you have. So keeping it at a high level here today, we'll just dive in and take a look at some examples from other users. These are public examples, and what you see here today and what I'm showing you is public as well, and I'll leave the link as a leave behind and you all can explore it on your free time. But within the world in which you all work and live professionally, I kind of brought forward a few examples that highlight the capabilities here. And of course, one of the biggest and first use cases of story maps is really public education through online experiences. And those online experiences can be of a variety of types. And I think pertinent to the news now in the world we're in, here's a great story map that shows some details on the Colorado River Basin, essentially providing the opportunity for these individuals to give an overview of the issues at hand, the stakeholders at hand, the idea of supply and demand, and who's in need of this water, and to be able to do it interactively with some good key visuals here. So they provide a nice overview, and I'll show some capabilities here. They're able to provide interactive maps to provide that context to where folks are. So you can see I can scroll around here and we can zoom in, we can search for places to better understand where the story is taking place. In addition, they also do a great job of putting together a timeline to help tell some history and events over time around this story. So they cover the balancing act of supply and demand, but this ability now within these products, we can put our maps on there and our pictures and our text, but we have some ability to bring in some great visuals and timeline capabilities that, as a user scrolls through this site, they can kind of go through history and get context to the events as they happened in time. And this story map is pretty in depth, and obviously you all can then explore it on your own time. There's a lot of information here. They do go forward and actually take a look at some metrics and provide these individuals with dashboards. Actually, here's another interactive map where we can do some filtering of what's on the map through the products. So we can understand how big these reservoirs are in these basins and who owns them and where they are. And I believe if I go a little further down here, we get into some of those metrics I had mentioned too, right? So this capability to visually communicate quantitative and qualitative data kind of all in the same place, again, through a very simple user interface and builder interface. Another use case that I kind of find interesting is this ability to give kind of guides and tours. This one is kind of taking a look at Neolithical artifacts and locations in the North Atlantic. And so what they've done here is provided a nice overview, given their intent of what they're here to tell their story about, why they're doing it, and then provide some nice walkthrough experiences. So here's a tour through those sites as they exist now, where they are on a map. And as a user, I'm scrolling through this, I'm reading my information, and this information is updating as I'm going through it, right? So I'm getting presented new pictures, new images, in addition, some context of where that site is on the map, and help me understand in a greater sense of this, essentially what I'm looking at here. This is a great story map as well, because they also offer this capability to participate, right? So whether it's getting information back from the public, or it's getting donations from folks, or just getting them to engage in some way, right? We have this ability on this platform to do that through a variety of methods. There's another great example of a guided tour. This one actually is I like it because it could potentially work on a mobile device as well, and really provides like a walking tour through historical Alexandria. And within it, they have a nice scrolling experience. And again, you get to a map. Once you understand the context here, you see the places on this map of significance. The user is able to select these and dive into a story that's of importance to them, right? And as I said, this could even be something that is made available through an on-site QR code to folks on their mobile devices. They bring it up, they're walking and they're seeing where they are at the same time and getting context to what they're looking at as well. So just a really nice example of being able to go through a physical place with this and learn something about what you're looking at. So beyond guided tours and kind of educational outreach and getting folks to engage in some ways, I really like this example from the New York State Museum in the city of Albany's archaeological collection, where they've gone ahead and actually used StoryMaps as kind of a lens or a discovery site into some of their collections. As you go through this story map, let me interact with this. As you go through this story map, what you're able to do is essentially see places around town that they have digitized. They have some data that they put in the maps here where they're probably doing archaeological digs as developments are happening. They're building parking lots and new buildings. And within each of these now, they have an individual page here that's associated with it. And for all those pages, they can link folks right off to either historical map galleries, maybe even their artifact galleries. So we can get them right kind of into the web page or the search engine within kind of the main system you use to get to the information that they're interested in for that specific location within the city. So I assume they're adding to these as they go and as they're doing digs and discovering more, but from a public perspective, it just provides a nice geographic approach to getting to that archaeological and exhibition data that you have that these end users would be interested in. And then I have a couple examples here too of folks using StoryMaps to, as I describe it, bringing historical documents to life, whether they be maps or other things of interest, I suppose. And the two we're going to look at here now do take some historical maps and place them on the earth and bring some context to them. And the first is around the Colorado River, where Arizona State Library has taken a series of historical maps, the paper maps that were in books and stored within their archives, and they went through the process of actually putting them physically on the map through digitization and some essentially giving these paper maps spatial references so we can use them within the technology to look at them and do overlays within our modern kind of world where we can view them against our current backgrounds and draw and landscapes and bring context to other data layers that you might have as you're looking at these historical maps. So yeah, they went through the effort, they scanned everything in. They even came with profile maps and documents as these surveys were being done. These surveys are done in the early 1900s. Took a few years to get it done, but the end result of all of this, as they've gone through and worked with it and laid them out onto the map, you'll see actually some of these starting to come forward as they're showing you the work that they're doing. I think the end result is essentially this GIS data set that has a couple different areas of interest, those maps geo-referenced within there, and then sub-maps as well, and that's all been tied together for further analysis. And the cool thing is the visualization they did at the end, where they draped it across a 3D landscape to provide kind of a fly-through of what those maps were, in addition to also providing that end user the ability to have a before and after kind of picture or comparison. So this ability to kind of swipe through documents and have them against a landscape background and some other data is really pretty powerful visualization. So again, just a great example of using stuff that's in your archives and integrating it with spatial technology and getting out to folks to use. Along the same lines, this is out of Stanford University, but they went through a bunch of historical mining maps and deciphered them to be able to come up with 3D visualizations of those claims and potentially be able to view them not only in their essentially what they are in space and time, but also be able to map out the tunnel structure underneath. Let me take a look here. So they would take a map like this, historical map, and with some other documents of information they have that have quantitative information about these areas. They could put them on a map and then be able to visualize them in their GIS and here on the screen. So these are maps of mine shafts that actually are color coded to denote kind of their depth and direction. So you can help have some 3D representation on a 2D map. But they were able to combine it all together to essentially create it. Let's get down to our GIS map here, where we actually have those claims mapped out, we can actually put the structures, visualize this map from underneath. We have the depth of where that claim went to based on information. And then, as you saw, you could actually use those maps to create a 3D structure of the mine shafts within that area to look at and visualize. So it's really cool to take some historical documents and come up with something really modern to be able to really have a good representation and visualization of what the actual world was like underneath the ground there for folks who were working at the time. And then again, just promotion of we see StoryMaps being used for the promotion and presentation of multimedia contents. This is a great example that just talks about the tidal Thames River and the fact that it is like an estuary that, has lots of wildlife and lots of changes throughout the day and throughout the year, and how different areas of that river behave differently and the ecosystems that are associated with them. I think it's great that here, they're actually getting some of their content out to the story map, whether it's their podcasts or any videos that they want to have. It's just a good way to bring awareness to some content that you all would like to, have folks be able to find and find more easily. And this is a great way to do that, incorporating it with, other context and I suppose content that you want to put with it as well. Public participation, this is not within your world, I don't think, but I think this is a great example of some capabilities you can do with the story map here. This is all about kind of collecting bird information and bird data. I think the idea, and I wanted to get across, is the ability to collect some information from the public through this as well. So, folks will be able to come to the story map, they'll be able to see, where these bird sites are, information about them. But, more importantly, maybe from the creator of this site, we can get some feedback from these folks, right? So we can provide an avenue to get directly into a survey form for folks to be able to start filling out that information. Where did you see this? What did you see? Add a picture, add an attachment, add a document. Very quickly, we can start to have those kind of workflows as a kickoff point from these survey or from these story maps. And then from here, I've kind of gathered a lot of other avenues for you to learn more. So there's a lot of story maps and articles out there that bring together different content for folks to take a look at. This article here is putting together galleries of story map examples around certain topic types, whether it's public engagements or activism, or doing briefings and presentations, right? If you were to go into any one of these collections, it's going to take you to a curated place where you can take a look at some story maps and get some resources about examples that do specifically just that, or even kind of the how to go about doing that yourself if you'd like to. And of course, there is the Story Maps gallery, and you can interact with it here within this application. And of course, everything I'm showing you here, it actually has a little pop-out button, so you can go look at it full screen if you'd like to. But the gallery will allow you to search for terms and explore other story map examples that are out there to kind of help inspire you to see what folks are doing. There's just a lot here for you to be digested and to learn from. So these resources are here for you. And then really the kind of how to get started. I know Todd and I were talking about this and thinking about it and who you all work for and who you all are. Getting started technically is very easy. There's some guides here on how to do it. I'm going to link to the main page so you can go there and get signed up or signed in, depending on how things are for you and your setup. We'll talk about that here. And of course, resources in terms of learning. This takes you to a whole learning path of tutorials and lessons and videos on how to use story maps and how to get started. In addition to some other video products that are put out there and just what's new and really kind of how to leverage the tool to get the look and feel that you want. And I think, I generally work with state government users, and a lot of state government users have Esri within their organization somewhere. And the same can be said for local governments as well, especially throughout Colorado here. And I have some colleagues in the same position as myself who interact with those, those counties and those towns across the state. And likely they all have some kind of Esri footprint as well within them. And if that is true and you are working with those folks and you have contact and this is something you'd like to do, I would definitely start there in terms of getting started. Now, of course, if you don't have any Esri access, we can help you get started as well. It's a pretty low entry in terms of cost and in terms of getting started. So if you have any questions around that, just let us know. And then, of course, all of this can be put together at a higher level, right? So these story maps can be put together into collections and aggregated up to the state level. There can be offshoots from the History Colorado sites. There's a lot of ways once you're using this to tie stuff together between organizations like yourselves to share the data collectively, share the resources you have, tell your stories collectively, and really promote each other as well. So with that, I guess I'll leave some time here. Let's wait 10 minutes for everybody if they have any questions, if there's anything they'd like to learn more about. Yeah, please let me know.
Thank you very much, Peter. And you're going to provide that link to everyone, right?
I am. I'm going to put in the chat right now.
I just wanted to say, some of you did see that we had Benjamin Snolnik from the city of Alexandria, Virginia, who was going to join us. Unfortunately, he had a conflict and was not able, but he was one of the persons who put together the African American Heritage Trail story maps. So, and you can see that linked in Peter's story map introduction. So, any questions? I know there's a lot to look at and to think about with this great tool. Peter did a great job, I think, at showing the capabilities and the aspects of putting together a lot of really interactive and I think fun ways of presenting historical data, including repository data. Again, a great idea to put into any kind of grant fund that you may be contemplating to do with your collection, and going for a SHF grant. We have actually some SHF folks here that have joined us, that can talk about, demonstrating that public benefit. And, if you could put together something that's in a story map format that's available to everybody, it's an easy way to put together an exhibit that has public interface and can get, that collection better recognized. I must also kind of say too, before we get in the other questions, is that when we deal with prehistoric archaeological collections here in Colorado, we do try to protect the exact locations of those resources. And that is part of the agreement to become a repository too, that you're going to secure the exact locations. You can do a lot of storytelling with generalizations and general areas. So that's an important part to keep in mind when you're putting together any kind of map presentations talking about archaeological sites. If there's ever a question, you should probably run it by our office just to make sure that before you make it public, that it's not giving away too much information about a Native American or prehistoric indigenous resource that may be at risk of being looted or potted. But historic resources, if they're generally well known and protected in some way, are okay to put into a story map. Is there questions for Peter?
Yeah, I got a question for Peter.
Mm-hmm.
Great, go ahead, Nathan.
Hey, Peter, if we wanted to get the data out of our, system that we have, whether it be Perfect, catalog it, or whatever, is there a way that we can import into story maps if we pull data out of like a report or something, or a comma separated, list?
Yeah, I'd be interested in seeing what that is. There's a lot of ways to get data into story maps. Yes.
If there's
Go ahead,
capabilities APIs, is that also an option that story maps out?
It could be, yeah. So ArcGIS Online, is a software as a service, and it's all services based. So yes, if you have APIs out there, we could take a look at what it would take to integrate, bring that information over, and we could probably put it into a service in ArcGIS Online that would kind of be representative of what it is in your other system, and then be able to look to that to build your story. But yeah, we can definitely chat more and dive into it. I'd be interested in kind of the details there and try to help you out.
Yeah, I'm just curious, other than, our curators copying and pasting out of one system into another system.
Right. Yes, I understand that.
Great.
Yeah, we should follow up and take a look at, I'm not as familiar with the systems you all work with on a day-to-day basis, so I would need a little education on my end to be able to kind of get to the bottom of that with you.
Great, maybe you can follow
Fair
up.
enough. Thank you.
Great, thanks,
Yep.
thanks, Nathaniel. Michelle has a question. Her hand is raised up. You want to go ahead and unmute yourself, Michelle?
Okay. Hello, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Is this working? Okay, good. Just making sure. I haven't had any recent work or access to StoryMaps. However, I did a lot of work with what is now being called classic StoryMaps. And I was wondering if some of the similar templates are still available, such as the shortlist. I was just thinking from a general curation standpoint that other more photo heavy formats might be useful for repositories rather than just maps, or like primarily maps, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. They're still out there and you can use them. You just have to go directly to them. It's a different website. So it's storymaps-classic.com. I'll put that in the chat right now. Obviously, they're no longer being like developed with new feature functionality, but the templates themselves still do exist.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Great, thanks, Michelle. Yeah, and I do want to recognize here that Rebecca says, and while it's, we make specific requests for indigenous sites, it is a sort of best practice to not provide exact locations regardless of the type of site, unless there is a reason to do so. Again, if you have questions about that, please talk to our office about, posting any kind of thing about indigenous archaeological sites. But a lot of generalities can be done, and certainly artifacts are possible. But again, you should probably confer with us too before doing anything. Let's see, any other questions?
Yeah, just add one last thing. Like I said, I'm local here in Denver. There's lots of Esri folks that are local here in Denver who would be happy to come spend some time with you, sit down, talk about story maps or anything else if you're of interest. Don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'll find the resources.
That sounds good, Peter. I know we've had discussions before, you and I, about most of the museums are usually associated with, as you've said, some sort of city or county that probably has already Esri accounts. And you said, as you've said, if you do not, you live in an area that doesn't have one, you can help set them up with an account. Is that right? Or look into
Yes, absolutely.
Let's see, how do we reach you, Peter? Can you put your contact information? Perhaps it's in the link that you provided, but if you could do that, we could do that.
I will put it in there at the bottom. Actually, I'll just do a quick edit, and it'll be in the footer there of that site.
Great. And then Pam says, I'm trying to build a story map. I thought the old Cascade and other classic types were going to be discontinued.
Yeah, the answer is they kind of are. They're kind of legacy. Like I said, I put the link in there. Like, they still exist. You can get to them and use them. No longer being developed, built on older web technology. Yeah, I'd say that would be the stuff to consider.
Great. We have 2 minutes left, so one more question for Peter. We can close this out for today, if anyone has one. I'm not seeing anything. So I would like to thank our presenters. Amanda, thank you very much for showing us the New York City website and all of the resources that the repository has in New York City. Peter, thanks again for showing us Esri's product, StoryMaps, and I hope that communities and repositories throughout Colorado think about how they can better put things onto the web and make things accessible through these types of formats. I really appreciate it very much. There is also Amanda's email. I appreciate that as well. Please reach out to her if you have questions or further comments to her, also to myself. And I hope that all of you have a good rest of your day, and hopefully you can join us for another Confab. Thank you so much. Thank you,
Thank you.
Peter. Thank you, Amanda.
No problem. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.
Thanks.